One of my favorite things to do in FRC is theory crafting. That being looking at the past and asking what if, and things of that nature. One of the biggest things I like thinking of with in that regard is of district championships. We always like to ask the question of what if our favorite 2 or 3-member alliances were able to go on to the championship and team up again. And as we've seen, this hasn't happened a lot in FRC. In fact, the only 2 cases I know of are when teams 27 and 33 teamed up in 2014 after winning the state championship, and then the Green Hope Falcons and Triple Strange teaming up in 2019, however, unfortunately getting out in the quarterfinals of Roebling in 2019. However, one other thing I like to ask is, what if the winners of the district championships went up against each other in almost like an inter-district competition? It's always perplexing, as we all know that the winners of every single district championship is an amazing alliance in their own right. And of course, there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. I mean, if I were to ask in 2012, the introduction of the second district system, whether the Michigan Alliance or the Mar Alliance would win, it's a pretty hard question. You can't just look at the 2 final scores and say, well, this one would have won, as you had 2 powerful alliances. The alliance of the Hot Team, Lost Gorillas, and Rat Pack are both all amazing in their own regard. However, when you look at Mar, you have teams 25, 16, 40, and 341. Miss Daisy wouldn't let them lose easily. And with the art of defense as well in 2012, it's not something that can be easily answered. And with both alliance captains going on to do well at the World Championship, it's one of those fun what-ifs. However, I'm going to be looking at another year, of course. So I'm about to say something positive about 2015. If that's something that you don't want to hear, I ask that you skip ahead 3 minutes, or leave the video if you must, as it's something that I'm pretty sure you weren't expecting going into the video. I have mentioned before about my feelings for 2015. It's not my favorite game at all. It's my least favorite. However, there are some aspects about it that do make it interesting, especially in regards to theory crafting. Because the interesting thing about that one was it's a lot like 2001 in regards to the fact that you're able to look at every single team at their best. Of course, if they're not knocking over stacks constantly. But with that, you have 3-member alliances that will and should be able to perform at their best consistently. And because of that, we can look at the champions and say, hey, what if this regional went up against this alliance? Or hey, what if my favorite alliance from the state of Michigan or from Indiana, for example, what if that winning alliance went on to the World Championship? How would they do in each division? And that's fun to look at, of course, because if you take out the cans, you can see that each of those alliances could reasonably go up against each other. This is not a distract from the fact that 2015 is not the least fun game to watch. However, it is interesting in theory crafting, and that's what I'll be presenting today. What I did was I looked at all of the district championships, all 5 of them, that being Michigan, Pacific Northwest, Indiana, Mar, and New England. I looked at all of the alliances, all 16 from Michigan and all 8 from the others, totaling 48, and I asked the question of if all 48 of these alliances were in the same competition, which one would make it to the semifinals? Which ones would make it to the finals? How fun would sectuple finals be? Those, of course, all being interesting questions. What I will say now is that what I've come up with is not a clear and definitive answer, as with many more matches, there's always the potential of robots breaking down and knocking over stacks, something like that. However, with what I did, it is interesting to see what happens, because there is no one district that completely decimates the other. And it's not even the same alliance that wins in every single category. So what I'll be showing you today is 3 different ways of measuring this, and that I believe are fair in their own regard. So when it comes down to this, with all 48 alliances, there was no way of knowing how they would have played in something like this had happened. However, I did try my hardest to be able to do something respectful of them as well. Okay, so now going into this, if we look at it, the first category I did was the average score. What I did was I took the average of every single playoff score each alliance had. For instance, with the Bedford Express Alliance for Michigan scoring 232.7 average between their octofinals, quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals. For those of you who didn't know, for a brief period in the state of Michigan, for FIM, before they broke up into divisions, they would have 16 alliances in 2015 and 16. Thus, each alliance, if they wanted to win, would have to win 2 matches in the octofinals, 2 in the quarters, 2 in the semis, and 2 in the finals to be able to win, with the extra matches leading to many robots breaking down, and of course a lot more fun for the audience to watch, as each alliance would have even more of a chance to really test their mettle. With that being said, if you want to look, as you can see down on your screen, we see that the number 1 alliance here in this regard is the Bedford Express. Them alongside their partners, of course, the 548 and 1711. Number 2, not trailing too far behind, of course, is the New England number 1 alliance. Who can forget Mechanical Mayhem and the Cyber Knights? Of course, Cyber Knights on their up-and-coming tour of becoming one of the world's most incredible robots. Then you have the 11th Alliance of Michigan, then the 3rd Alliance of Pacific Northwest, then the 6th Alliance of Pacific Northwest, and then 5th Finance Alliance of Michigan, 4th of Michigan. Then you have our first MAR team, and as you can see, going all the way down. One outlier in this regard, some outliers of course, you have the 16th Alliance of Michigan, ranking 16th. Ironic, but with that being coupled up with the 16 alliances, it makes it interesting to watch. Then as you go further down, the one big outlier is, of course, the 1st Michigan 3rd Alliance and the New England 3rd Alliances not being able to get much traction. And of course, one thing about 2015 that I do not like is the fact that you're unable to, if you have one bad match, you most likely can't recover. There was one example of that with the number 1 winning alliance having one awful match but then coming back with a score of 212. However, this isn't something that happens all the time, and there were many times where knocking over stack meant certain death in the competition, which was not my favorite thing about it, and it was one of the biggest changes that the Chevy Champs made in order to remedy that issue. If we go on to max, you have the same resultant, with 1, 2, and 3 being the same. However, you start seeing some alliances that didn't make it far in the regular competition because of those bad matches becoming a lot higher in here, though. You have a score of 260, of course, a score of 256, and then you see those as well. The 11th Michigan Alliance was able to have a score of 239. 8th Alliance Michigan had a score of 231. Tied with them, the 12th Alliance of Michigan. And of course, Pacific Northwest number 1 Alliance, who wasn't as high ranked in the average category, was able to have a high score like that. And that's one of the other questions we must ask when we analyze this. Are we going to assume that each robot scores the highest they ever scored in every single match they play? Probably not. Can we assume that they scored the average? It's more fair, but probably not, as every team has good and bad matches. So what I did is the 3rd one, which I'll show you in a second. However, most of these are actually pretty accurate to the other thing as well, with a few being 1 or 2 up and down, and then of course the outliers, which had really good matches and some really bad matches as well. Now we're going to move on to the next one, this one being the big one that I thought of. As you can see, we're going to have a whole bracket and everything like that, like a regular competition. Now I'm going to do this sort of like the 1st Michigan did. They had 16 alliances, and then of course the top 8 would move on after octofinals. Now I haven't thought of a creative name for 64 alliances, or in this case 48. I do have the fun sextuple finals for the final 32. However, with let's look at the tri and the triple alliances. So look at this in a standard way. If you were to take, what I did here was I kind of gave Michigan a bit of a pass here in the first round, because I feel like in the case where each of them had 4 matches with 2 octofinals and 2 quarterfinals, what I did was I took the average of the 2 matches for both of them, and I said I took the higher of the 2. So it didn't change much, with most of the teams having about the same scores for the octofinals and the quarterfinals. However, I wanted to give them this in the case that they had a bad match in either, because they had more matches opposed to the other ones, which this being the first 2. If we look at this, of course, with the first round, we have advancing with FIM Alliance 1, FIM Alliance 11, FIM Alliance 4, FIM Alliance 8. Then you have the New England Alliance, FIM Alliance 2, have Pacific Northwest 3rd Alliance, 5th Michigan Alliance. So you have a lot of Michigan teams here due to the fact that a lot of teams in Michigan came out strong in the first 2 matches, or first 4 matches. And then after that, they'd have some bad matches either due to the other alliance grabbing cans or disarray within the alliance. However, you do have a nice, after those first few, you do have a nice wealth from all over the competition. After this, we're going to move into, of course, the next one, the top 16. Now, with the top 16, you will see a change now. You see Alliance 41, which was 5th ranked, is now 1st ranked, with them being, of course, having a much higher score in the semifinals as opposed to the other ones, with, of course, some alliances getting up higher as well. You have, of course, the top in the last round being 2nd. Then you have the 33rd Alliance, which in the last case was actually ranked pretty low, making it all the way up here, ranking a lot higher in this regard. Then going on to the second one, you have the 38th Alliance, which moved up from 13 all the way to 5, got the 44th, 26th, 25th, so on and so forth, all the way down to the last one, making the cutoff being the 42nd Alliance, who was 18th and moved up to 16. Now, if we move on to the next one, onto our final 8 alliances like you would have in a normal competition, you have the following. Number 1 being, yet again, having very high scores in the finals, that being Mechanical Mayhem and Cybernetics Alliance. Then, of course, the 1st Michigan Alliance, Bedford Express and Robostanks, and their partner 1711. And, of course, the 5th Michigan Alliance, have a great alliance from New England there. And you have 3rd Pacific Northwest, have a powerful MAR Alliance there, the 1st Alliance from Indiana, and then, of course, Buzz Robotics Alliance as well. So you do have quite a few, you do have every era represented here, the final 8. Going into the next one, what I did was a little bit different, as opposed to the last one where I had measured this is the first one where first time I measured the quarterfinals, then the semifinals, then I measured the average final score, and now for this next cutoff, I did the max score. No, I didn't do the max score, I did the average score. So in order to move on to the semifinal of this theoretical competition, what you had to do was, it was based off of your average score overall. So with the average score of the averages of each of the categories. And because of this, you have 4 good alliances moving on, that being the 1st Michigan, you have the 1st New England, you have the 3rd Pacific Northwest, and the 5th Michigan. After this, what I said was that you have 4 alliances, you're going to have them compete. So I said you're going to take the max scores, and the final 2 are going to move on. Final 2, of course, being going into the finals would be, of course, the Bedford Express, Robostangs, and 1711 against Mechanical Mayhem, the Cyber Knights in 2067. Now, there's 2 ways of doing this. I can either say, hey, the Bedford Express Alliance did score the highest average and the highest max, as the other ones had a few points less. However, there's one interesting way that does change this outcome, because in almost every single scenario that you run, it's almost certain that the Michigan Alliance wins. However, there's one more simplified one in which the opposite happens. If we look at this competition in terms of how it played out normally, let's say we take each of the finals matches, so we say the 1st Michigan Alliance is going to do exactly how they did in Michigan finals, and the 1st New England Alliance is going to do exactly how they did in the finals of New England. You have some very, very, very close matches here. Now, in the first finals match, what we have is, of course, the Michigan Alliance losing by only 6 points. Surprising, isn't it? So because of the score, with a score of 239 to 238, a 1-point gap, the New England Alliance wins the first one. On the second alliance, both teams would do better, with New England scoring 256 and Michigan scoring 246. So with both matches done, the first one being a 1-point deficit, the second one being a 10, this is a metric, of course, where the New England Alliance would go on to win, which is interesting to see if you don't just take the max or the average. One thing of note was that in all 5 district championships, not a single one ended with a tiebreaker, which is pretty significant when you look at some of the other district championships up until and since that point. And it's nice to see all represented in the first few rounds, as there wasn't one that dominated the entire continuity of it. And one thing that was nice, so shield your ears if you want to hear it, but one other thing that I found interesting about 2015 was the amount of lower seeds that would do well. Well being, of course, subjective. However, there were a lot of cases where the finalist alliance was, say, the 7th or the 5th or something in that regard. So because of that, you'd never have a low seed winning a competition. There was no 8 seeds winning I don't think a single 7 seed winning. However, you would have them in the finals a lot, showing that since the top 2 scoring robots are together and they're going to automatically decimate in the finals, you did have some mobility. And it's always nice to see a 1st and the 8th alliance in the finals, as that's something you'll never see at a regular competition. Prayer's over for that. I hope you like seeing this. This one is a little bit different than others because if I were to ask 2016, 2012, 2013, any of those years, it's going to be a little bit harder. You'd have to map every single robot, what they did, what they were good at, and what they would have been able to do at their best, and of course with defense up against them. So in that regard, that is a way that I do appreciate 2015's game style, that being specifically for this sort of theory crafting. One thing I do want to say about this is that all five of our district championships did have some great teams in there. And all 5 really did perform at the World Championship as well. And of course, with the final 2 being so neck and neck, we did have some really good alliances in there. You had 195 being an alliance that was ultimately taken out by the World Champions, and the Bedford Express making Einstein, however, also being taken out by the World Champions. So thank you all for watching. This has been the FRC Historian.